to Career UpRising. I'm your host and professional career coach, Lorraine Rise. Join me as I guide you through an amazing journey of self-discovery and empowerment. If you are looking for work, changing careers, or stuck in a toxic job, then this is the show for you. I offer both practical and spiritual guidance to help you up-level and advance your career. Let's start the uprising. Hey everyone, you are listening to episode 143, Your Job is Not Your Identity with Sunny Khurana. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, and please take a moment to review this show on Apple Podcasts. I say that every show because it's very, very important to me. I appreciate it, and I read all the reviews, and it really, really helps this show to grow. It's the best way to pay it forward for the show that I give freely as often as I can, twice a month or so for the last 5 years. I cannot believe it's been that long. So we have a fantastic episode today. This is a real treat for me. As you guys know, I have said it many, many times. I absolutely love bringing my clients on to the show to interview them. It is one of the most fun and most rewarding things that I do in my job. And in the studio today, we have a two-time Career UpRising and member of what I call the Career UpRising Hall of Fame, Sunny Khurana. And he is really, really just a special guy. And I've known him for about 4 years now. We've worked together a few times, and he's worked with some other members of my team as well, and gone through my signature program, Career Transformation. And he really has just an incredible story and message to share with everyone today. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about with Sunny, there's so many angles and so many takeaways from, the work that we've done over the last couple of years. But one of the biggest themes that Sunny and I talked about was this kind of phenomenon, or this thing that happens to us where we get really absorbed in our job sometimes, especially if we've been there for a long time, to the point where it almost feels like your job is your identity. And, then when you separate from it, it's almost like there's a loss or a grievance of some kind. It's a real transition that you have to make. And if you go to this job day in and day out every day for years, and then suddenly it's not there one day, it can be a little bit traumatic. It's not like a light switch that might just flip on and off, right? And so if you have ever felt this way, then I think that this interview is going to be really, really valuable for you. But also, just in the bigger picture, we're going to talk today a lot about the mental and emotional aspect of searching for a job, and especially when it takes a long time. And I think this is a really overlooked aspect of job searching. There's so much career advice out there centered around your resume and your LinkedIn and all the logistics of a job search. And that's all important, but we overlook the toll that it can take on you as a person when you're searching for months and months. You don't know when the searching's going to end. It's a really difficult process, and you need the right mindset and the right support to be successful. Otherwise, you can really get burned out. So there's a lot of different layers to this conversation today, but all of these things are things that Sunny knows very well and has been able to overcome. So I am so excited that he is in the studio today. And so I'm just going to let him come on in a minute and share his story in a way that only he can in his own words. So welcome to the show, Sunny.
Lorraine, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I remember when we first met that 3 or 4 years ago, and I learned about the podcast and I listened to the podcast. And to be on the podcast, I listen to so many other podcasts in my day-to-day life. Super excited. I'm super excited. So thank you for bringing me on.
Of course. Thank you for being willing to come on and share your story. That's something not everybody is able to do. And I'm so glad that you're willing to do that, because you really have a great message. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your situation? Let's tell us like what you do and for a living, and kind of what was the state of your career and your situation when you came to Career UpRising most recently?
Absolutely. So started my career in finance in the healthcare pharmaceutical industry about 19 years ago. And I had worked at really two large companies my entire career, but most recently for a company for about 15 years, and had really established myself there working in different areas of the business. And really, I'd had moments considering to leave, and, there was always a good reason to stay. So I really felt like I was part of that company. Early in 2022, they went through, actually, I received a role that I was super excited about, basically my dream job. That was like the culmination of all the work I had done for the years past. And within a few weeks, I found out, okay, it was going to be restructured. There was going to be a reorganization. And I was at a bit of a crossroads. I could try to stay and find a role that wasn't going to be what I thought it was, what the dream job was, or I can choose to leave and take some time off. So there was a bit of soul searching that happened in that decision, and I made the decision to move on, and then, moved and start the process with Career UpRising and kind of my own personal soul searching of what I wanted to do next.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that you are, what I like about you and what I noticed about you coaching too is you're kind of a deep thinker and a big picture thinker. You do that soul searching, right? And there's a lot of that in a career transition. And I think that is necessary sometimes. And I've certainly been in similar situations where you have the option to stay or leave, and it's not an easy choice to make. You feel like there's a risk either way sometimes, or a cost either way. So definitely, thank you for sharing that. So tell us a little bit about just your experience job searching. What was difficult about it? What worked, what didn't, what was that experience like for you looking for work once you made that decision that you were going to go look for something new and take a risk?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because for me, and I think for a lot of, of my network who's gone through similar situations, you always think it's going to be easier than it is, right? So I remember even when we first started talking about using your network and applying to roles, and I think when I first started out, I said, oh, this will be easy. I'll call my contacts, I'll post my resume, I'll go through and just start applying, and this will happen quickly, right? So it was more quantity and pushing myself out there as much as I can. When the process isn't like that, when you have, 15, 20 years under your belt from a career perspective. So got frustrated very quickly at the beginning, right? And it said, okay, I thought this would be easier. I thought I would make a few phone calls and jobs would come flooding in and offers would come flooding in. And it just doesn't work that way, right? So I think that's when I went through a little of that mental health journey that we talked about of, okay, mentally, there's two ways you can look at the situation, right? If you're applying for roles or not hearing back or being ghosted or even going to interviews and being rejected, you can look at it as real strong rejection and take that on personally, or you can really try to look at it as, okay, this wasn't the right fit. So it's a choice, right? It's a choice how you look at anything in life. And you can look at the brighter side or look at the negative side. And I found that the more I looked at the negative side, the harder it was mentally, right? And the more I took it as a rejection, like is natural to do as human beings, the worse it got and the more challenging it got to stay motivated in the search.
So many people can relate to that. I hear from so many clients that I used to have no problem getting a job. I never even needed a resume, and now I can't get an interview. It has changed so much, the landscape of how we find jobs, and I think there's maybe many reasons to that, but a lot of it is online job boards where everyone's just flooding their application in. But so many people say that, hey, it never used to be this hard for me. What's going on? And that's a hard reality to accept when something used to be easy. And now it's really hard. So how did you kind of get through that from a mental health perspective? How were you able to kind of get through and push through it and reframe that as not rejection, but just, I love your positivity and your spin on that. And I think people need that. So how were you able to kind of get through the tough times of the job search and that mental health part when that was kind of difficult?
I think a big part of it was you try to surround yourself with your cheerleaders in your life, right? The people that believe in you the most, right? So, as you're going through the process, and I'm going through this now with friends of mine who are going through similar situations, is you need to surround yourself with people who believe in you, right? Because there are going to be times where you don't believe in yourself. There are times you're going to say, oh, I should take a job that's really not what I want, but it will be a job, right? I have to pay the bills. Or I want to take a job that will pay, I'll look for something that will pay less money because now I don't believe in myself, right? So you start letting that voice in your head start talking to you. And you want to tell that voice to shut up, right? And you don't want to listen to it, but you want to surround yourself with the people who know what you're capable of, who know you're worth more than just your job, right? And that who are going to believe in you and kind of cheer you up during those tough times. I think that's really important, right? And then putting the structure around it, right? Which, the Career UpRising program and the coaching efforts really help a lot with, is putting the structure around that really helps. But you have to not beat yourself up and second guess every decision that you've made. You can choose to do that, which I definitely did many days, but you have to really keep pushing that the right situation, the right role, the right opportunity will find its way to you if you stick to a program, if you're consistent, and if you don't just try only one tactic to look for something.
Yes, absolutely. I always tell clients the right job will always say yes. And then I say, repeat after me. The right job will always say yes, right? We have to remember that. You're not going to miss your chance or your destiny or anything like that. If it didn't work out, it's not right. And I know it's still frustrating. We got to get through all these no's before we get to the yes, but sometimes life is that way. So absolutely. Well, so going back to your choice to, walk away and kind of take the severance and go out on your own without a job lead in front of you. That's a scary thing to do. And having been with a company for so long, a lot of people get wrapped up and absorbed in their job, like it's as if it's who they are. And then when the job isn't there anymore, it's really difficult to not wake up and have anywhere to go or anything to do. Can you speak to that concept of kind of disassociating your identity from your job? What was that journey and that struggle kind of like for you once you separated?
It was, it was probably one of the best, but also worst experiences as I was going through it. I remember talking to you when I kind of made this decision and when we first when I first left the company, and you and many other people were saying, Sonny, this is great. Like, you have time off, you can work out, you can travel, you can enjoy life, you don't have to worry about work. And there was like tiny percent of me that believed that, but 95% of me was like, no, this is terrible, right? Even though I got a severance and even though I had the time off, I felt like it was one of the worst things, right? And it's hard because when you work somewhere so long, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into your job, but also your coworkers become your friends and become your support system. Whether you like it or not, you're spending so much time with them. So I think you end up caring a lot about that company, but caring a lot about people's opinions and your status at a company and what it means to not be there anymore. And most of these people aren't the folks who are the support system in your real life, right? But you end up wanting to value those opinions and, again, second guess why you did what you did, right? There were many times where I said to myself, oh, I should have just found a role and stayed, or I should have not ever taken this job or that job. So you go through that, right? And you go through this kind of feeling of loss and feeling of having no direction and going always, what's the worst case scenario, right? And like, this is terrible, right? But I think, again, surrounding yourself with people who say, well, what's the worst thing that happens, right? You can't find a job, you will find a job. But that voice in your head, again, is telling you that, oh, you're not worth it. You deserve this because you didn't manage your career, or you have imposter syndrome, and you start going through all those feelings. But I think for me, it was as I went through it and as I was saying, okay, a job is a job. Like I want to do something where I like what I do, but I also want to not attach myself to the company letterhead or the pay stub or the amount in my paycheck, right? As a person, I'm worth more than that. But it's really hard because it's when you put all that effort into a role. But I think it was like, I'm happy to go through that experience when I look back at it. But I know that it's very difficult, right? And I think it's a good lesson I learned through that process.
Absolutely. Yes. I remember many coaching sessions with you talking about all of that. And so sometimes you were in a good place on the call. Sometimes you were in a lower place, right? It's up and down roller coaster through, yeah, it's very understandable. And I remember feelings similar to that in my separations as well. And I hear what you're saying too about it looks like you have this open canvas in front of you and everyone should be envious of you. But yet with that open canvas, there's this, what am I going to make with this? There's an enormous amount of pressure, right? You have this open schedule and everything. But you also at the same time, like you said, don't have a direction. So you can put a lot of pressure on yourself. So it makes sense to me why you would see that also as something that comes with a bit of a burden as well. Absolutely. And it's a little bit scary, right? So it's freeing, but it's all freedom's a burden. Sometimes we don't know what to do with it and we're not used to it. So absolutely.
No, it's fascinating. There's moments that you go through the process where, like I would have former coworkers who were getting opportunities and I would be happy for them, but I would think, why am I not getting this opportunity? And it could be something that I never would want, right? But you start fooling yourself into this thought process, right? But again, it's how you look at it. If you want to look at it as rejection and negativity, you will feel terrible, right? So you have to try to change your mindset. Otherwise, you will spiral.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what was it that made you decide to kind of get some help and say, I want to go through a coaching program or I'm going to get, a mentor or some help? What, is that something that you typically do? Or was this the first time you'd work with a coach? What was your decision process in terms of deciding to get help?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? I always tell this story of the first few years of my career, probably the first 10 years of my career, I never valued the coaching and the personal connection and the mentorship that much. And then as I got more senior in my career and started dealing with more complex interpersonal relationships at work, and as I started to get more mature as a person, I realized how much value there was to it. My first coach was through a program back in probably 2010, 2011, and it's someone who I still talk to this day, right? And has been a good friend and a good mentor and a good sounding board. So I had interest and I'd worked with coaches in the past as well, but the career management, the career coaching, the job transition piece, I knew that I needed some direction, right? Because I was going through the different emotions we've talked about, and I tried the easiest things of just applying to roles. And I said, okay, I need to have some structure, but also I need to have some accountability and I need help, right? And it could be as simple as a sounding board, someone to talk to. It could be going through that whole structure of what to do in a job search. But I felt like I needed that because one, it would keep me busy, right? And two, it would keep me accountable to try different tactics and to really try to be more comprehensive than what my initial thoughts were telling me to do.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. So now that you are on the other side of this journey and have landed a great job, what advice would you give for somebody else who is in your position and maybe unemployed, doesn't have direction, or is in a job search right now? What did you learn that you would share?
Well, of course, I have to plug the Career UpRising program. Of course,
I never tell people to do this, you guys, ever, and they do. You're so sweet, and all of my clients are. I do not grease the wheels here at all.
There was no hidden agreement between me and
no.
But I think the program with Career UpRising is good. But here's why, right? Okay, it gives you structure, it gives you accountability, and it gives you focus, right? I think similar to what we talked, right? I thought that if I just applied, it would be easier. And your big point to me was, Sonny, you have to network at your level, at what you're looking to do, right? You have to keep networking. And I was like, oh, that's not as easy as me clicking the button 15 times a day and applying to 15 jobs, right? So point being is the program has a big focus on your network and not just making the calls, but identifying your network, making yourself accountable for who you're reaching out to and why, targeting certain people with certain companies. But that's just one aspect of it, right? Then there's another aspect of the resume support and the laying out what you do, right? And how someone who looks at your resume for 10, 15 seconds can make an impact and understand what you've done. And the LinkedIn and the personal coaching, right? And that branding piece. And we even did interview practice. I remember I was struggling with a point of how to answer a certain question, and you walked through it with me, right? So I think those are all aspects that I used, right? And I think it forced me in a good way to not just try one tactic, which was easy. And that's not being lazy. It's like you want to do what you think will work the easiest, but having those conversations, you're going to show vulnerability. You have to talk to your network and tell them what you're going through. But your network is valuable, right? And that's why you have to nurture it when you have a job and use it when you don't have a job. But I think it helped me to do that, right? I remember going through, kind of listing through all my contacts and trying to identify which to reach out to and when and why. And I even remember us talking about the guilt of having a conversation with a contact in your network to ask them for help when you don't really want to ask for help. You want to feel like you earned it yourself and but people are there to help you, and that's what your network is there for. So even that conversation that we had, months ago, that gave me perspective, right? So I think all those aspects are super helpful in the search. And even when I would get ghosted in an interview or ghosted after a discussion with a recruiter, I could talk to you and say, Lorraine, this is really hard for me to keep doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the kind of things that the program helps a lot with and gives some structure to.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you benefited from it. And speaking of networking, the position that you landed came from your network. Big shocker, right?
Yes. So of course, I have to admit that, to everyone who listens to the podcast, that you were, of course, right. And I remember talking. So, you were right from the beginning and it came full circle, right? So, yeah, the network helped the most. And, through the interview process and through evaluating the positions and kind of what to do next, I remember us talking, as recent as earlier this year, and I was debating what to do and where to go and which offer to really consider and what was I most excited about. And, through your network is always it is the most valuable because that's people you trust and you have had those connections with, right? But you were 100% right.
Well, you were right too. I think your gut instincts were in the same place. You just had to have the courage and the know-how to do it, right? I think a lot of times we know what we need to do. It's just we need help doing it and executing it. And so you did the hard work, absolutely, actually landing the job. But my last question for you to kind of tie up all of this together is, what did you learn about yourself throughout this journey?
So it's interesting, right? I think learning, I'm not a patient person, right? So learning to put structure around something and to be patient, specifically for this job search effort, I learned how impatient I am, but I learned how valuable it is to kind of have that structure and program around it. The biggest piece for me is that, money and a large company or a paycheck with a certain company's name on it, it's great, right? You feel part of a large organization. It's fantastic. But, when you're struggling in this transition of careers, you want to be happy. I started my new role, 5-6 weeks ago, and I'm actually happy, right? Which I wasn't for a big part of last year, right? And even coming on here, talking about it, kind of being vulnerable about it, I know, from my experience, and everybody's experience is valuable, right? But for me, it was, I don't want to be unhappy someplace that I don't feel valued, but also I want to go somewhere that I feel like I can make a difference, right? And I think the process of going through the Career UpRising program the process of talking it through, not just with you, but people in my network, helped a lot to see the value that I have as a human being when I'm not working, right? And to not try to link that job or that paycheck or that company name to who I am as a person, right? I think that to me is the most important piece that I learned. And it seems very obvious, right? It seems like Sunny, you should know this. Like, this is not some big learning. But for me, that was a big learning for me, right? And going through the program, having the opportunities to talk about this helped me a lot. And, that to me is the biggest value I could have gotten. I look back at the last year, 10 months, 9 months, whatever it's been. And while it was tough sometimes, I'm really glad it happened because it got me to where I am now.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. That's all we can ask for, right? Is that we go through what we go through to end up in a better place. So perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your story and opening up about your journey. I know other people are going to benefit from it. They feel the same way. Absolutely. So thank you, Sunny, and thank you guys for listening. And you can find the archive of this show on my website at careeruprising.com/podcast. So you can find this and all 140 something episodes on there. I'm also on Apple Podcast and basically every single place that you can find a podcast. So thank you again, Sunny, and we will be back for more. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you so much. That's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard today, please consider giving the show a positive review on iTunes. It would mean a lot to me, and it would help to spread the word so that others can learn about the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and I can't wait to connect with you again next time on Career Uprising.
This show is brought to you by InflowRadio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.